one of those people that I've always like looked up to growing up was my grandfather. You know, self-made man, started a garbage business. So I've always kind of like molded myself into that like ideal of him, because he was like that patron figure. And
yeah,
the older I get, the more Mexican I become. It's something that I've been saying a lot. Like when I was a teenager, very cringe. I would never listen to the shit that I listen to now. You know, I find myself listening to a lot of Juan Gabriel, Luis Miguel, like stuff that
I'm hearing like identity vibes.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is a big thing for us.
So curious for you, because you have a similar trajectory, right? Like you have a very strong foundation in person that you can look up to in your father. And, you know, talking about like watches and stuff, like, you know, you have some keepsakes of him, what, you know, that he handed to you and like what that meant for you. So I want to dive into that. Like, what is that tether that you have to the legacy of your family, of your father, and what does that mean to you?
His legacy to me is, first and foremost, you know, my character, the person that he helped forge, my values, my morals, my sense of, you know, never giving up. Right. And then I'm extremely fortunate that we have this living, breathing business that I was able to take the reins from him. And then getting back to like what you're saying, you know, cool little things. Like my dad, he was one of those like 90s, you know, guys from coming down from El Norte with a Centenario chain and, you know, some big esclavas in the 90s with his name on it. And he's still you can see him on Sundays at the restaurant. He's got a big diamond necklace that says Carnitas Uruapan. He rocks it, you know.
Like a rapper chain style?
Yeah, like that. Yeah. So it's cool. You know, all that stuff will forever be with me. And I've been fortunate that he's given me some, you know, little bits and pieces of stuff like that along the way.
Yeah, it's such a great way to connect. So obviously these things are very meaningful things, right? Like it's not something that you just buy every weekend. So it's like something that you kind of buy with intention for long term.
Right. And you know, it's something, you know, there's very few things that you have with you all the time.
Yeah.
You know, a watch being one of those things, maybe like a necklace. This actually is, my madrina gave it to me when I did my first communion. Still with me.
That's awesome.
So little things like that. I think you're right. We as a Mexican society hold on to things. My mom's still got a drawer full of recuerdos from, and candles and stuff from baptisms and recuerdos from quinceañeras. And
yeah, I think it's beautiful now. I think I'm learning to appreciate it more. Because, you know, this is something that I talk a lot about, and I want to kind of dive into this idea of like being ashamed of your identity. You know, I think that a lot of first generation and so on, a lot of times people are like kind of ashamed of their heritage. They kind of whitewash themselves, try to run away from it. And I was like that, but now it's coming full circle. And I reflect on that a lot, obviously, because, you know, 5 years ago, I was like young, broke, and just like pursuing my dreams. And now that I feel like I've achieved a little bit of, you know, level of success, now I'm more intentional with these things to be, you know, it kind of shifts into almost like a responsibility. And curious to see how that was for you. Like when you were younger, that you kind of have that transition as well, where now you're starting to see like, what am I leaving to the community, to what it means for my family, and like what my heritage, you know, where does that like fit into your vision of where you want to take your dreams?
Identity for me has been an ever evolving thing and kind of a complex issue. You know, my dad came here from Michoacan in 1969. I was born here in 1983, but my dad never disconnected from Michoacan. So I would always constantly grow up going to Mexico. And I didn't realize how fortunate that was at the time. Right. A lot of kids, for, you know, whatever reason, a lot of, even your example, like a lot of people here are undocumented, and they, even if they want to, can't go back and make that reconnection. But I was very fortunate that every December, 3 weeks, I was gone. Every time I was off of school, I was gone for 3 to 4 months. And I grew up kind of having a second life out there, second set of friends. My dad always kept a house and some different business things that he did over there. So there was always like a constant back and forth. Yeah. My dad was back and forth like every month and a half to 2 months. Yeah. So I grew up down there and really like developed an identity and friendships that I still have to this day that are very tied to it. So I felt like when I'm down there, like I'm Mexican, you know, I speak the language fluently. It became an integral part of who I am. as I started getting further into, you know, high school and eventually college, you know, my life started kind of making me choose a path. Yeah. I went to University of Michigan. There weren't a lot of Mexicans there. Yeah. So there weren't really a lot of role models and a lot of examples, kind of leading by example, putting that identity out there. And when I worked in the corporate world, I mean, it was, there was nothing. It was like me. And then, you know, if I worked really late, the paisanos that would come and clean the office at night.
Right.
And, you know, and I would talk to them in Spanish because I was still working.
That's like the only time you got to
But
speak
you don't
to
see it.
How does that make you feel now? Obviously, like, as we're kind of going through it, it's, you know, you're just focused on building and continuing the path and finishing your career. But now in retrospect, what does that make you feel like? And where do you think that our, you know, place in helping contribute to help fix a little bit of that?
I think we have to be conscious about building a bigger ecosystem for other Latino entrepreneurs. I think they're there. Yeah. I think, you know, they're just kind of waiting to be united and organized. And, you know, I think they're kind of just beneath the surface. Yeah. But I think we have to be mindful about that, about, you know, driving results for ourselves, for our businesses, but also trying to help each other and, you know, sharing the knowledge that we've accumulated along the way, sharing our networks, which is huge.
I think one of the biggest things that our community suffers from is what's called poppy seed syndrome. So the poppy plants grow very evenly. And then, you know, it has these little like bulbs. And when one of them gets really tall, the plant cuts the nutrients to the taller one so that all of them catch up. So it's like a psychology term that I learned. It was fascinating to me because I saw a lot of that in the Midwest, particularly in communities of color, because we're kind of used to fighting for the scraps. So we kind of have this.
Well, we're used to fighting for positions. We're used to, you know, we're used to fighting against each other to get in, you know, colleges, to get in MBA programs.
To be the one Latino.
The one that's, you are the chosen one.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be like that. You know, my parents wanted to help me, wanted to push me in the right direction. They generally, you know, were like, we know you have to go to school. We know you have to do this. But they couldn't tell me how to do it. Yeah. They couldn't help me with, you know, hard skills. You know, my parents barely spoke English. They couldn't help me with, you know, proofreading papers or, you know, helping me choose classes. My dad has a second grade education. Right. You know, he's not going to tell me how to get into college. Yeah. You know, we're the next generation now. And, you know, we've blazed a path that, you know, others coming to this country before us, you know, haven't. And I think we have a responsibility because, you know, not only to financially help people, but more importantly, to mentor people, to show them.
Yeah, I'd love to dive a little deeper into that. Definitely in a very powerful position. I think personally, you know, you kind of have the very strong foundation. I think like, I'm kind of like that same thing with my father and my grandfather. I think you got like this really big monolith role model that you could look up to, like your father. But you know, it's not always the full picture. It's kind of like the baseline, the foundation to stand on. But then now you kind of have this like self-awareness to be like, now that I can kind of catch my jump here, I can jump very high. But now, then you look up and be like, well, I don't know how. And when you look at Dad, he kind of got you to this place, but now it's up to you to kind of continue the legacy. When you were becoming of age and becoming your own person, who was a mentor that you can look back to? Or like, how were you actually able to figure some of the stuff? And I know you probably had to do a lot of the stuff by yourself and it was trial and error. Yeah. But did you have any other person that kind of helped you look into the other side of where you needed to go and you need to become with the momentum that you were born into, that it's a very privileged position, but it's just the beginning of the next level? So did you have any mentors growing up like that were able to give you some advice or knowledge to kind of help you further and better yourself?
I didn't have a mentor that was like specifically do this, do that. So I thought the best thing to do is kind of roll with what the crowd's doing. Like if I'm at, you know, a school that has a great finance program and everybody's getting, at the time, because tech wasn't as big as it is now, everybody that's doing well on the other side is working in finance and doing well, and you know, I'm motivated, I'll give that a shot. And then you get there and then you realize, okay, you know, there's a lot of politics here, there's a lot of relationships, there's a lot of doors being opened to people because of who their parents are, where they're from, you know, even like dumb stuff. Like they grew up with a neighbor, and the neighbor is, you know, a vice president or president of a company or whatever. You're getting all these legs up. Well, my neighbors were like, you know, where I grew up are like the panadero, the taquero, you know, I have no connections into that world. So I struggled to get internships. I struggled to find a seat at that table. I eventually did when I started working in wealth management at a very well-known bank here in Chicago. Two of the people interviewing me were University of Michigan grads. That got me in the door. That got me to the next step. But I never had someone, you know, like at a real position of power, just saying, here, do this, study this. This is what looks good. You know, make these moves. And I was doing that, and at the same time, you know, in the backdrop, helping my dad with our family business, with our Carnitas Uruapan, you know, business at 18th Street. I never let go of that. And my dad was always in my ear. And again, it's like one of those things where like he didn't know exactly how, but he knew what I should do. So he was like, ¿para qué trabajas en esas compañías? Siempre vas a tener un patrón. Trabaja para ti mismo.
Damn, bro, that's powerful.
He was always like, you know, in my ear, like, mejor patrón de un peso que peón de 100. And he's right.
That's amazing advice.
And I think, you know, one thing that we do have going for us as, you know, sons of immigrants is that there are insane rates of entrepreneurship in our community. People in our community are, you know, not ones that just, you know, sit around. If they can't find a job, they'll create a job. They'll go out on the street corner, you know, start selling tacos, start selling paletas. You know, at every level, there's entrepreneurship. And a lot of what drives that entrepreneurship is lack of access into the traditional career paths. And the further I went in the corporate world, I got 8.5, almost 9 years in, I just started realizing and seeing the bigger picture. Like, I am being groomed to always be a cog in a bigger machine. And the skill set that I'm learning is only valuable at a big institution, at a big firm. And I have no equity, I have no ownership. You know, I'm just always gonna be a cog in a machine. And my dad was always in my ear, like, I don't know how you're gonna do it, but find something that you can do for yourself, something that you can own, you know, something that can make you independent. Ownership. And that can make you money. And
yeah, I agree. I think as a business owner myself now, I've come to realize that nobody ever got rich off a salary, right? Nobody ever got rich of like little income.
You can get comfortable.
You can get comfortable.
Very comfortable.
Ownership is power. Ownership is what matters.
That's right.
And it's amazing to hear that, because that's some fucking powerful advice.
Yeah.
I would like to think that, you know, like you were able to take bigger risk and kind of land in
thanks to the sacrifices of my dad.
So I think
100%.
That's where, you know, and I got the bumps, like it becomes an opportunity because I won that. And I'm so heavily jealous for my kids to have that, for my employees to have that, for my community to have that, then now it's just like, let's go to fucking warfare. Like that's the one thing that I feel like
but you have to keep developing that mindset, because it's easy to get comfortable. And I mean, I have little kids. They're, you know, 6, 4, 3. They're too young now, but you better believe when they're a little older, they're going to be just like me, you know, waiting on tables, helping in the kitchen, learning that hard work ethic, you know, learning that my dad's not just going to hand me something. I gotta work to get it. I gotta, you know, I gotta do my part. So for me, you know, my dad was in my ear for years, right? And it was always, he actually, ironically enough, never wanted me to take over the family business.
Interesting.
He didn't. He didn't want that life for me. He would.
'Cause it's hard.
It's hard. He would. You know, when he first started in Pilsen, and we'll get into that a little later. You know, he was in there probably Friday nights, 10 p.m. to get wholesale orders out to the different supermarkets. At the time, he did wholesale out by like 5 a.m. And then he'd close all the way at 6 p.m. and then up again at 10 a.m. on Saturday. Like literally just working himself to death all the time. And so he was bending over backwards to make that a reality for me. At my high school, they used to call him the Cash Man. You'll love
that nickname?
Because he would roll up to pay tuition every month on the first of the month with a Carnitas Uruapan bag full of like 20s, 100s, 50s, 10s, you know, a little bit of manteca splatter on the bag. And he would drop the tuition off in cash every single month.
Dog, I'm tearing up a little bit. That's fucking sick.
But that hustle. And he did the same for college. You know, he you know, I'm very fortunate. You know, my dad paid my way through University of Michigan, which is no small feat.
Tortilla by tortilla.
Taco by taco. He would joke. He's like, este mes van a estar más delgados los tacos. Because we got to make that tuition payment.
Interesting. So I could visualize it. Like your dad always pushing you to be like a bigger man, like in the.
He was always like, tienes que ser chingón.
Yeah, chingón.
But he couldn't define it.
Yeah.
Couldn't ttle me exactly how.
Let's talk a little bit about the business, Carnitas Uruapan. Food as the driver and preserver of culture, and that materializing into a great institution and ultimately a great brand. And I think that that's what you understand very well, because I think one of the things that sets you guys apart from a lot of like the traditional paisa restaurants that have, you know, you guys are not the only ones that have been there for 20 years, but I think you now, like your experience, your trajectory going back into taking the reins, I think what makes you the visionary person you are is really about brand. And I know that you are very fixated on that. And I think that that's what drives a lot of the success.
We are a huge part of the population in the U.S. already as Latinos, specifically as Mexicans. I mean, we're the largest of that Latino community. And the way growth trends in the population are going, we're going to be over 30% of the population of the country. So we're very much seeing the Mexicanization of America. I don't see brands, food brands specifically, that have become, well, there's chains certainly, but I haven't seen anything that's become well-run, well-branded, you know, multi-city, and eventually goes on to the next level, but either an IPO or a sale to private equity, or doesn't sell, but just goes to that level.
I think that's an opportunity for Latinos in all industries.
And it's not just food, but
everywhere.
If we cater to our own community, which is my vision, there's enough wealth to be created there amongst ourselves. And who knows our community better than ourselves? You know?
Facts.
Who knows? No one. Everybody's trying to play in the space.
Why are we going to fucking let the white people take that shit over from us? Fuck that. I realized that myself. Because I think it's the legacy mindset. Like, I think we're building businesses, and this is the way I'm building my tech company, which makes me the outcast. But I think that this is what I attribute, you know, everybody remembers my fucking name when it comes to that. I'm not like, you know, and we're open coming.
It's a marathon.
It's the marathon. And like, I never fucking understood, like, people just want to get rich fucking quick. And it's so pathetic. It angers me.
To do what? Buy a bunch of fancy stuff? I'm not trying to be a food trend. You see a lot of those. How many gourmet burger places were there 4 or 5 years ago? How many are there now? How many, you know, poke bowl places, cupcake places, churn and burn food concepts, and there's all these brands that are created to meet that demand and then fizzle and die.
Yeah.
And you know, I hope to, you know, build a model, tweak it, have the numbers, you know, tell a story, and then, you know, am I gonna let an outsider in? Am I gonna take an infusion from a private equity firm that invests in the space? I don't know. But why can't I do it? Or why can't I recruit a team or tap into my network? Like, what is so unique about a bunch of MBA, you know, privileged boys with a bunch of money at a private equity fund that like, let's invest in the Latino space. Let's get exposure. Let's get this brand that's built up, and then let's just like scale it. Like, I saw that in B school. Yeah. Why can't I just do it?
That's ours, bro. It's
right.
I love what you just said, because we're at the beginning of the fucking story.
So don't sell ourselves short.
We gotta hoard our
wealth. And if that means a slower growth trajectory,
fuck, man,
it might mean that, but it's a long-term play.
I mean, you have clarity of what your purpose on the legacy of your family is.
That didn't come till I was 30 years old.
Yeah, I bet.
9 years into banking and in an MBA program.
It finds you.
It finds you. It does. You just got to be willing to get to that fork in the road and take that risk.
And believe in yourself.
And bet on yourself.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. I think life will knock at your door once or twice
at most.
Because at the end of the day, we only exist to empower people to turn their dreams into a reality. Like, that's what we're here to do. And
it's not just a business.
It's not just a business.
If it is,
it's the meaning of what it can do. And I'm very,
and that's the most powerful organizations are not just a business.
And I look at it and I like this, the wealth. When I go on the TED Talk and I say, yes, I'm worth $100 billion, but I created $900 billion of wealth, I want the majority of that to be for them. Because that's when I know that I actually made it. Fuck me, like I'll be wealthy. There's only so many Patek Philippes.
But that's what it takes to for our community to create lasting change and multi-generational wealth. Yeah. It takes ownership. It takes companies with power that bring people along for the ride that look like you and I.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, this has been amazing. I think we just began to scratch the surface, but
good stuff.
This has been full of insight, and I'm very excited.
A lot of soul searching in the conversation.
No, it's good.
But it's good. It's good to look inwards like that.
It's easy to just go on a podcast and just talk about the accolades and the success, just the superficial stuff. I want to always like dive deeper.
I don't even think we talk that much about food, but
it's a given. Like the Carnitas are amazing. I think the persona is so important to me because you want that next evolution of you and I to look at me like, that's something that, that means something. And then that becomes a springer for the next business that's going to be here for the next 100 years after you and I are dead. And then you're going to be that person that like, yo, let me seed you. Let me help you.
Well, if we do it, others will look at it and then they won't be limited by, what's possible for a Mexican kid, Yeah.
So it's been very important conversation. I'm very grateful for you. To me, it's been therapeutic and it's been inspiring. It's been a whole fucking experience.